Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to have two of the state's leading reporters come in, and we're going to catch up on what's going on in Harrisburg, particularly on Capitol Hill. But first, Gene Barr joins me, and we'll take a look at Pennsylvania's economy now and what it could look like in the future. All of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, Gene Barr, he heads the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, sometimes called that chamber guy. Is that what you still use that
Why
at all?
not?
Why not?
Use whatever you want.
I know, but that's what they always think of with you. Well, listen, Gene, you had a summit where you had a bunch of folks come in. You talked about the economy now in the state, particularly the business side of it, the banking side of it. You also had a look into the future. Talk a little bit about the nature of the economy in this state, what the business community, is it thriving, is it struggling, and what do you see as the head of, obviously, a very, very large and substantial segment of the business community?
Yeah, this was our fourth annual economic summit we've done with the Pennsylvania Bankers Association. We had Senate Majority Leader Jake Corman, House Majority Leader Dave Reed, some guy named Terry Madonna was there. Actually did a great job putting a lot of this in perspective. And we had a couple of other people who spoke about trends, what people are looking at, as well as cybersecurity, et cetera. And Pennsylvania's economy, of course, like most others, there's positives in it, there's negatives. As a kind of an older industrial state, we certainly have our challenges. And one of the areas that was creating jobs a couple of years ago has fallen on some hard times. That is the natural gas industry. Yeah. So things are stumbling a little bit there. Pennsylvania, of course, has always had real historic strengths. We've always been an energy exporter. Yeah. We've had historic strengths in bio and pharmaceutical, and those are still there. They've, of course, had some challenges and tough times. But like every other state, there's pluses and minuses. And what the summit helps to do, and we hope to do, is get us pointed in a direction and make some of the changes that we need to make so Pennsylvania can take advantage of the strengths that we do have.
Yeah, I mean, it's my sense, I know the state reasonably well, that sort of east of the Susquehanna, down in the southeast and here in south central PA where you and I are chatting, and up in the Lehigh Valley, you've had much more diversification. And when you get in other parts of the state, it was the old industries, coal, iron, steel, and as they've gone through an evolution, it's replacing the jobs and trying to attract them in various parts of the state. Did any of the folks there address that fundamental problem? I mean, in terms of what can be done, or is it one of those almost intractable situations?
Well, there specifically, there wasn't a lot. Of course, both of our elected officials who were there spoke a little bit about their visions and what we need to do, curing some of the real problems such as pension, putting Pennsylvania on a more modern trajectory. Part of the problem that you've noted is those historic industries. We know what's happened in steel. They've been subject to some cheaper imports. What's happened in coal, environmental regulations and others, and the emergence of natural gas has hit the coal industry really hard. One of the things that we're hopeful on the natural gas, and has done some of that, is in those areas that have been hit hard by coal, natural gas to a certain degree had come in and helped pick those economies up. But you're right, there's a lot of areas that are in the western part of the state that are still struggling, and many of them still losing population. And so we've got to figure out how we do that. Pittsburgh's done a great job in terms of reinventing that city in many ways. The educational institutions,
medical field, right?
Exactly. From a medical, from a technology side, some of the work that's going on there is doing great. We need to expand those and kind of deploy a lot of what's being found in those labs into the economy.
Yeah. You also did something you also had an individual come and talk about cybersecurity. Yeah. What was the broad outline? I mean, we're having this big debate with Apple right now, and the federal government having to do with, the federal government wants to get into, I think it's an iPhone 5. I didn't even know they still made them anymore.
I don't know which one it was.
Yeah, well, it was an iPhone 5, and all of that big debate going on. What was the general outlines of what he said about cybersecurity?
It was fascinating, and he talked a lot about what was the topical what are the topical issues today? And you've seen things like ransomware, where you have these hackers who will come in and literally take over your system and then charge you to unlock it. It's happened to a hospital. It's happened to a police department in the Midwest. And talking a little bit about how you make sure or try and ensure that doesn't happen. You had a fascinating statistic. I think he said on average it takes 229 days for a business to figure out it's been hacked.
Oh, my God.
And you can imagine the damage that happens with that. So he talked a little bit about some of the safeguards you can take, making sure that your data is available in another manner, trying to do some of the things that keep individuals safe, which you need to do as an individual. In this case, it was mainly businesses, what you ought to do for your business to make sure that your data is safe and your customers are safe.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's fairly scary. I mean,
it was a scary presentation. Let me tell you.
I mean, you hear and we have in my family we have some personal where hacked in, steal your ID, run up credit card bills. I mean, we've done that with the folks from the Credit Union Association, and they talk about steps to take. But we're doing so much online now. I mean, literally, the whole universe in our lives is dominated by the internet.
It's all out there. And he talked about the explosion, obviously, in connected devices and to a large degree, the danger that does. You saw recently where automobiles have been hacked into and driven off the road because of the tremendous wireless connectivity there. And as you look at that, the newest one, you talk about credit cards, but he talked about one of the newest ones, which is the sale of health information and how that's available. Basically, you can go out and, for $25, you go out and buy it and utilize that and make tons of money off it.
All right, I'm chatting with Gene Barr. He heads the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We'll be back. I want to ask him, let's go to the future. We'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Gene Barr from the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry is with me. We're talking about a summit that they had, especially, the economy, what's it like, what needs to change, and we're going to look a little bit. You had a professional there who talked a little bit about the future. And plus, you've been around the business community. That's you represent. Where do we go? What are the industries? What are the businesses that you think that we could attract in our state, to create new jobs?
When you talk about where we go, you talk about we as a society, obviously things are moving much more and more towards, the wireless and all the connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. And I've heard a lot of people say to me recently, geez, I mean, with jobs going, a lot of automation's coming in, and that's right. And one of the real dangers and one of the reasons why we oppose and have a problem with, say, a minimum wage increase to 15, you make a lot of that automation more likely once you move to that. But we had somebody, I think he was out of New Mexico, did a great job talking about and kind of putting things in perspective. We hear a lot of doom and gloom, but talking a lot about the way that agriculture has improved significantly, where we're able to feed so many more people in so much more of an efficient manner.
Because the agriculture is more efficient.
Because the agriculture is much more efficient and, again, does less environmental impact than we've had before. We had a fascinating statistic when we talk about environment. And as somebody who's looked at a lot of these environmental issues over the years, his statement was that the average automobile today, traveling 65 miles an hour down the road, has fewer emissions than a 1970 model automobile sitting still. Think about that. Sitting still, evaporative emissions, et cetera. So we hear a lot of doom and gloom, and we're right to be concerned about things like global warming and how we address those and reduce CO2. But he brought up the point that as we move forward as a worldwide economy, and we certainly are a worldwide economy, you've got output up significantly. I believe it's 72 trillion. CO2 emissions are down.
They're down. Yeah. You know, one of the things that strikes me is if you look around at our economy, you get down into the southeastern part of the state, you know, in the Philadelphia suburbs especially, where you have tremendous diversification. You've got pharmaceuticals, you've got banking, you've got real estate, you've got finance, you have
all the eds and meds.
And meds. And somehow, you know, the economy down there, it is, in statistical terms, much better. And what's very difficult is, you know, you move into the more agricultural regions, but yet Pennsylvania is a huge agricultural state. We don't even think of that very much.
Correct.
And the same with tourism. There are two huge industries in this state, right?
Ecotourism is huge, and that's another one of the points that was brought up. He said years ago, who would have thought you would have taken a cornfield and knocked out the corn and turned it into a corn maze?
Yeah.
You know, things like taking your kids out for pumpkins, he said, is a tremendous growth industry. I think he said 10% of revenue in agriculture is kind of this ag tourism type stuff.
Right, right.
So it is changing significantly, and you're right in that people talk about Pennsylvania as a state, and as we've said before, it's really more like 3 or 4 states, because when you're in the southeast and kind of looking west, unfortunately, they don't look west a whole lot. It's significantly different.
So we'll forget about James Carville, that it's Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and what's that in Alabama in between?
Alabama in between.
All right, well, look, I want to thank you for coming in for this update. This is very helpful, and we have to get our business panel, back with your compatriot. All right, we'll be back with Angela Couloumbis and Mary Wilson, 2 reporters, and we'll talk about all things Harrisburg, not the city so much as the capital. We'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back. Well, 2 of the state's leading reporters join me to talk about what the goings-on in the Capitol. I'm talking about the Capitol in Harrisburg, not Washington. Joining me is Angela Couloumbis. She writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Mary Wilson. She's the Capitol reporter for Pennsylvania Public Radio. Well, Mary, let me start with you. We've had a lot of bad news out of Harrisburg recently, and unfortunately, you know, Governor Wolf has had a press conference in which he announced he has a treatable form of prostate cancer. First of all, we wish the governor well and a speedy recovery. Nothing to do with politics. I think we would all agree it's about his health. How did that press conference go? I saw some clips from it. What did the governor say?
It kind of felt like the governor was assembling the press corps to say, "Okay, kids, everybody stay calm. Dad's going to be fine." He was almost jocular, you know, kind of cracking jokes and just very upbeat, very game about the whole thing. So he sits down with his wife, First Lady Frances Wolf, and he says, you know, "I have a treatable, a mild case of prostate cancer. Caught it early. Let this be a PSA." No pun intended. Which is PSA is also a test for prostate cancer, but let this be a PSA. Get your checks early. Go to regular medical checkups. And he's going to be starting treatment in the next couple weeks. Treatment is supposed to take a few months. Won't interfere with his job.
Yeah, as I'm going to say, it doesn't seem. I mean, friends of mine, unfortunately, have had it, and they're up and working. You know, that's not. So he seemed, as Mary points out, very positive. You need a good attitude, right?
Absolutely, and I think he was trying to dispel any sense of panic. Yeah. And I believe he achieved it because he was very, very calm, and he said, "I'm not scared, I'm dealing with this." The First Lady said, you know, there's no reason to be sad. We believe fully that he's going to beat it, and he's going to be able to work through it. That was the key message he was trying
now
to
Governor Casey had amyloidosis, double organ transplant, and, he worked through it, and lived a number of years after, and pretty tough guy.
Right.
Maybe that's the Scranton coal region in him, and he performed, and so I don't think I've not seen any indication that, he's going to be on the job, he's going to do his job. I think you would both agree with that, right?
That's what he says, yeah.
We don't know what his treatment is going to be. I think he purposely stayed away from giving details, and understandably.
Sure. All right, Angela, here we go again. We're back with the Supreme Court and pornographic emails. Justice Aiken, now as we tape this, the hearing is going on. There's a hearing out in Pittsburgh to find out, I guess, is the bottom line, does Justice Aiken, who received, you'll correct me, he received, and did he send? A few of these. Offensive, okay. You like that word better than pornographic.
Well, his were not straight up pornography.
Got it.
They were mostly jokes, very offensive jokes to women, to minorities, and other groups. But
I like that term, offensive. I think that's, go ahead.
Yeah, using the word pornography to describe these emails it's not an accurate way to describe what was being exchanged. He faces a hearing today, and it's fully expected that there is a deal in the works for him he faces judicial ethics charges by a judicial ethics panel. And he was awaiting trial, but we believe now that the two sides have worked out some sort of deal because they are going before the full court of judicial discipline, which ultimately will make a decision.
Now, the ultimate penalty would be removal from his office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they could be, we don't want to speculate on a deal, but it's not uncommon to say you'll serve for so long or you'll resign or whatever, but they could work out some condition there.
He could be sanctioned. They could continue his suspension. There's a variety of discipline that they could mete out.
Yeah. This is all. Do you think now we still have, and this is important, Doug Gansler, hired by Kathleen Kane, who's sitting on, by all your reports, thousands of emails, some of them offensive, some of them pornographic, some of them racist. You've seen a fair number of them, both of you have. So we're still waiting for some kind of release of those emails. Is that correct?
Yes, but I haven't heard much out of Gansler. I haven't heard much out of the office about that. Kane has made comments about it here and there when she's made public statements.
Right.
Most recently when she averted a Senate removal vote, and she, brought attention back to the Gansler review. There's also some question about, does Gansler have the authority to go forward with this review, since it doesn't appear that there's a contract that's been approved for his own personal investigation.
Right.
Although his firm, as I understand, is under contract with the OAG.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that before we run to a break? How you release them and what parts of them you release, and is it just going to? There's so much we don't know about what he's likely to do. Is that correct?
That's correct. He is going to essentially put together a report that describes everything and supposedly connects the dot and gives us the big picture, which we really haven't had up until now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. All right, when we come back, it wouldn't be a Pennsylvania Newsmakers show if we didn't talk about, you can smile, the Pennsylvania budget, which both these reporters have been covering. There's hearings going on. We'll find out what that's all about back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back with Angela Couloumbis and Mary Wilson, both reporters. They cover the Capitol and other important subjects and individuals in the Commonwealth. Mary, here we are. We're back in hearings. It seems like it's same old, same old. The Republicans are getting pretty tough on some cases, as you would expect with, Democrats, the cabinet officers, and other folks who are coming before them to testify. Is there anything sort of breaking out? Are we still stuck in this stalemate?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Stalemate still stands. And, you know, what's really interesting is that the kinds of things that are being discussed could have been discussed pretty much at last year's budget hearings. And if not then, sometimes the conversation is reaching even further back to, you know, did the Corbett administration cut education funding? Something we could have been hearing about in 2012 or 2013.
And we did, right?
Right, and we did. So it feels like there's not a whole lot of new ground being sown with these budget hearings.
But I guess the real question is, it looks like we're still in this stalemate that doesn't show any signs, at least publicly, of being resolved.
I think publicly and privately, I don't see that there's been any movement on any of the key issues that have led to the impasse in the first place, including pensions. And the status quo is the impasse. And you don't see any urgency to try and solve it.
Yeah. But at some point, with the governor vetoed about 13% of the budget, according to the majority leader. I thought it was actually higher. Majority leader in the House, Dave Reed, said it was 13%. I thought some reports said it was even higher, but we don't need to pursue that. So we have 6 months of funding, and soon both of you are going to be back reporting schools that are going to talk about and county human services.
Running out of money, having to borrow to make payroll or, you know, pay the bills. And
to do their jobs, right? And so we're now actually talking about not one, but in a sense, two budgets. And how does that all get reconciled?
I think if they can agree on the key issues that have held up the budget, including how to raise new revenue, i.e. whether to raise taxes, I think that once they reach that conclusion, they can pretty much figure out how to deal with the two budgets simultaneously.
And taxes, the Republicans are adamant. Wolf, in his new budget, wants over $1 billion in new taxes. There's 6 or 7 at least, you know, raise the state income tax. Do you see, and remove some of the exemptions? I don't see any movement from just following what you all write about. I don't see any movement on the Republican side to change their position on new taxes. Maybe in the Senate, you know, where they worked out some deal, you know, called the framework.
Well, even there, I mean, it could not have been heartening for the governor's team to hear Republican senators say this week in budget hearings, look, you know, I think it was Senator Vlahovic this week who said, look, I voted for the compromise bill, and I would have put up a vote for taxes if it had gotten that far. But this time around, you're going to have to work a lot harder to get my vote.
Stalemate.
There's been a lot of preoccupation about tone on both sides. You know, somebody described, I think it was John Barr, described the atmosphere as venomous. It's true.
Yeah. We only have about 40 seconds left. The Kane hearings, impeachment started in the House. If you had to guess, how many months does that go on?
Probably until the fall.
Until the fall, when she only has a couple of months
left in her term.
All right, thanks for coming in as always. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.